The thing about being a mental patient is that no one ever listens to what you say anyway, usually, so it's interesting to consider that Devizes police have taken it upon themselves to irradiate me, considering the fact that I am a mental patient, and therefore anything I say can be discredited. However, Devizes police are still insisting on utilizing a radiation source against me. Indeed, the main source of the radiation seems to be emanating from Wiltshire Police Headquarters in Devizes, so it's all very interesting to consider the lengths that Devizes police will go to protect their so-called reputation is really quite interesting. And I've now been irradiated for almost 6 years, since the 28th of July 2020, when a Master Mason of the United Grand Lodge of England, Samuel Buchan, decreed that I should be eliminated by a soft kill. Indeed, this soft kill was to take the form of radiation, to be handled by Devizes police and the Ferris family. So it's all very interesting to consider the fact that for exposing the fact that Walter Rose and Sons butcher shop was the location of an organ harvesting and child trafficking cartel, I was suddenly decreed to die. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, mental patients are supposedly known for not telling the truth, but this isn't actually the case. The words of mental patients are usually encrypted truth. And indeed, if I wasn't telling the truth, why would Devizes police feel the need to irradiate me on the authority of a Master Mason of the United Grand Lodge of England, Samuel Buchan? Indeed, none of this makes any sense. Apart from this, all reveals to me that I am indeed telling the truth about Devizes police being child rapists and Walter Rose and Sons butcher shop being the location of a organ harvesting cartel, child trafficking ring, and ritual sacrifice network. So it's all very interesting to consider how all of this interlinks, and the fact that I'm being irradiated and tormented and tortured by voice to skull technology, handled by networks of gang stalkers connected to Moonraker Lodge number 8747. Indeed, it's all very interesting how all of the police confidential informant networks in Devizes act as a hive mind for Devizes police and the Moonraker Lodge number 8747 Freemasons. So it's all very interesting to consider, and indeed, I am not only physically tortured by radiation, but also psychologically tortured by voice to skull technology, which is known in targeted individual circles as voice of God weaponry. Indeed, this weaponry was originally perfected by the Soviets during the Cold War, and patents of it were shared with US and UK intelligence. So, in effect, this is Soviet mind control technology for psycho-correction. However, it's being utilized in this case by the British police to attempt to drive me absolutely crazy. Indeed, the aim of the British police, i.e. Devizes police, is to drive me as crazy as possible so that I assault a police officer potentially and end up incarcerated in Roundway initially, i.e. the Green Lane Psychiatric Facility, and then possibly moved on to a forensic psychiatric unit. Indeed, I've recently spent 5 years. Indeed, I've been incarcerated in the UK psychiatric system for a total of 6.5 years, but the last 5 year stretch I did was in a forensic mental hospital, Blackberry Hill Hospital for the Criminally Insane in Bristol. And indeed, I was railroaded into the forensic system without needing to be incarcerated in the forensic system by the Devizes police lobby. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, I have a grudge against Devizes police for all number of reasons, but the most aggravating factor at the moment is the fact that I was railroaded into a forensic unit by Devizes police. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, I'm not a criminal in the sense that Devizes police portrayed me, and indeed my mental health notes portray me to be a far right activist. when I am not far right. Indeed, my theories are so much more complex than anything populist or indeed far right. So it's very aggravating to me to be cast by the police and the psychiatric establishment as a far right activist when I am not. Indeed, I loathe the Hitler guys and all of the networks associated with National Socialism in the United Kingdom at the present time. So, indeed, I would have no accord with National Socialist instincts at all anyway. So it's all very interesting to consider the fact that Devizes police have tried to frame me as a far right activist. Indeed, my mind controlled operation whereby I scrawled neo-Nazi insignia on the walls of the Britox in Devizes was an operation under mind control. Indeed, that morning, utilizing hand signals, Police Lieutenant Jerome Butler of Devizes Police mind controlled me into a Gladio operation, whereby I began acting as a Nazi operative. Indeed, by that point, I'd basically broken out of the programming and was engaged in a deep study of the Society of Jesuits. However, Devizes Police realized that this was occurring, and I was beginning to break out of my programming and would start realizing things about Grenville Lodge again. So they decided to utilize some sort of damage control, and utilizing a hypno programmer, Jerome Butler of Devizes Police, they spun me back into a neo-Nazi operative mindset whereby I was an operative of the Gladio 4 program and was acting as a Manchurian candidate for the Gladio 4 program. Indeed, this continually happened several times throughout my mid to late 20s. Indeed, from the age of 24 to 28, I was under a large degree of Nazi fetishist programming inculcated in me, originally by Dr. Leonard Johnson of the Process Church of the Final Judgment, who was an operative of MI6, i.e. the British Secret Intelligence Service, i.e. the British Foreign Intelligence Directorate. And indeed, this network of Dr. Leonard Johnson are heavily involved with narcotics trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. Indeed, they wish to utilize me as part of the Gladio 4 program, utilizing experimental techniques whereby they could soften in the minds of the populace the coming shift towards ethnopolitics within the United Kingdom. Indeed, I was basically operative to normalize white supremacist ideology, which interestingly is actually inimical to me. Indeed, all National Socialist thinking is inimical to my thinking, especially as a paranoid schizophrenic, and the persecution that paranoid schizophrenics have suffered at the hands of the Nazi regime. So it's all very interesting to consider that the networks of Dr. Leonard Johnson and later Jerome Butler, Police Lieutenant of Devizes Police, had me in. These networks are basically inimical to my thinking. So it's all very interesting to note that I was grafted into the Gladio 4 program, and this was revenge for my exposures of Grenville Lodge in 2012 and 2013. Regarding that, my girlfriends that were murdered by the Grenville Lodge Freemasons, Katty and Mishki, were Russian heritage, but they were British Romanov branch Russian heritage. So it's interesting to consider that they were British Romanovs, so they were descendants of the Russian royal family. And indeed, they were born and brought up in Britain. So they were not GRU operatives or anything. They were basically very troubled and tormented young females who formed a bond with me at Grenville Lodge. And indeed, we attempted to expose Grenville Lodge together, and Katty and Mishki paid for these exposures with their lives. And indeed, I was set to pay with my life also, and my soul was to be transferred into a black cat to dwell at Hailsham House for eternity. However, Professor John Drew stepped in, who had a slight sympathy for me, basically stated that I should be given a semi-lobotomy and therefore would have amnesia from the entire Grenville Lodge saga. So it's interesting, every time I begin to remember things about the Grenville Lodge saga, I am reprogrammed, usually with Nazi fetishist ideologies. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, I do have thoughts on the Zionist elite. However, I figured that they like to ritually sacrifice Hebrew commoners, just as Nazi psychiatrists like to ritually sacrifice for occult purposes mental patients. So it's all very interesting to consider all of this, and basically the impact that this Nazi fetishist ideology has had on my life, and it has had a detrimental effect on my research, as thoughts once implanted via mind control mechanisms can take over the entire mindset of the brain. So it's all very interesting to consider hypnoprogramming can begin to dominate the psyche, just as it did with me, especially in the early months of 2016 when I came into a lot of altercations with the law. However, it seems that as an experimental test subject, I would never have been put in prison for anything I was saying, despite Dr. Peter Crofts refusing to give me a mental health waiver. So it's interesting to consider, indeed, Dr. Peter Crofts refused to sign me off as paranoid schizophrenic during a court case because he simply didn't like me and he believed that I was a Russian agent. Indeed, Dr. Peter Crofts of Green Lane Psychiatric Facility is a Nazi psychiatrist with Mossad connections. So it's interesting, he basically has all the credentials of a Fourth Reich operative. Indeed, Dr. Peter Crofts is operative for a network of fascists connected to the British Phalange. So it's all very interesting to consider these British fascist movements and what their plans are for the United Kingdom. This directly interlinks with Palantir, which is actually a Nazi security complex, although they utilize Frankist frontmen, as is always the case. Indeed, the Nazi network and British high IQ societies always utilized Frankist and Sabbatean operatives to be the frontmen of their organizations. So any researcher joining the dots and linking it all up would begin to believe that everything was a Jewish conspiracy, when it isn't. Indeed, the people really running the show are white and consider themselves Aryan. So it's all very interesting to note. The common denominator among all of these operatives is some form of occultism, and indeed, even the high IQ societies are heavily engaged in ritual sacrifice, although they disavow a lot of the ceremonial hocus pocus of the lower ranking Royal Arch Freemasons. Even the 33rd degree is considered lower ranking in terms of this general overall network and framework of intelligence operatives. Indeed, the high IQ societies disavow a lot of the general hocus pocus and ceremonial pomp of the Royal Arch Freemasons. However, even the high IQ societies, i.e. the networks at the top of such networks as Mensa and Intertel leading into the entity, i.e. NTT, and the DVD nucleus, these networks are still engaged in rituals, i.e. the sacrifice, necrophilia, and cannibalism of children, as they believe these druidic ceremonies bring them some sort of occult power. And indeed, as I've stated before, the ritual sacrifice of mental patients supposedly serves some sort of occult purpose for the eugenicists and Nazi elite. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, such networks as the Maniac Murder Cult, who are technically a low-level satanic coven, they pride themselves on their mistreatment of mental patients and the fact that they attempt to manipulate, harass, and torture mental patients online and in the flesh, and attempt to cause mental patients to self-immolate various other mechanisms, and this is all part of the domination and control that is basically embedded in the Nazi mindset. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, this is very interesting to consider, considering that I was technically inculcated with Nazi fetishist ideology. However, my personality finds the National Socialist ideology and temperament absolutely disgusting. So it's all very interesting to consider and very strange indeed. The mental hospital Roundway Asylum, i.e., the current site of the Green Lane psychiatric facility, is a notorious paranormal hotspot. Indeed, while I was incarcerated in Green Lane psychiatric facility in May and June 2020, I was sexually assaulted by the ghost of a psychiatrist who, interestingly, was an apparition with no legs but a sexual organ, and he was wearing a long white psychiatrist's coat. So it's all very interesting to consider. I've always considered the comparison between the long white coats of psychiatrists and the long white coats of butcher Freemasons. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, these butcher Freemasons in devices are all Freemasons and operative in a grand scheme for the entity, i.e. NTT. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, I had once theorized that the Wiltshire Police Headquarters in Devizes was a headquarters of NTT, i.e. the entity. And indeed, the former police commissioner, Angus MacPherson, was a chief liaison between the British police and the DVD. So it's all very interesting to consider how all of this links up. And however, it's very difficult to figure out exactly what is going on, and one can only theorize. Indeed, the majority of psychiatrists in the United Kingdom have some sort of connection with the intelligence agencies, and there are also operatives of the Asylum Keepers Guild within the psychiatric body. Indeed, these networks all interlink with the Tavistock Institute, which is heavily Nazi in its theories. Indeed, John Rawlings Rees was very close to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was basically the Tavistock of interwar and Nazi Germany. So it's all very interesting to consider. And indeed, these Nazi psychiatrists, such as Ernst Rudin, formed the core of the psychiatric establishment in the Western world after the cessation of hostilities in the Second World War. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, as I stated before, the National Association for Mental Health, formed just after the Second World War, which is now known in the UK as the National Institute for Mental Health, was formed by a network of Bank of England operatives, including the Governor Montague Norman and his sidekick Otto Niemeyer, and a core of British psychiatrists, including Tavistock facilitators such as John Rawlings Rees, and also networks of Nazi psychiatrists and mind control programmers centered around the Reichsbank operative Hjalmar Schacht, including Dr. Werner Villinger. So it's all very interesting to consider the fact that the National Association for Mental Health is at its core eugenicist and Nazi. So it's all very interesting to consider how all of these basically dominoes are falling into place with what we are attempting to expose on this YouTube. Indeed, the Green Lane psychiatric facility at its current site still hosts the cloakroom, i.e. a specific mind control experimentation chamber where various selected psychiatric patients are taken for experimentation. And indeed, many of the more beautiful younger females who are patients at the Green Lane psychiatric facility are utilized as prostitutes, basically, in a sense, and pimped to various psychiatric connecting elites around the devices area. Indeed, they are victims. So to use the term prostitute would be wrong. However, they are pimped out in a sense and forced into sexual slavery with devices elites such as Ed Giles, who is the handler of the Roses Ironmongers corporation in devices, which itself is interlinked by a basement system to Walter Rose and Sons butcher shop and the ongoing organ harvesting scheme there. So it's interesting to consider there are a lot of mutated children kept in those basements for radiation experiments. So it's all very interesting to consider what exactly is going on in the town of Devizes. Indeed, it's all really quite dark and disturbing when one considers the fact that this town believes itself to be of a respectable reputation, when in fact it is concealing a very dark and disturbing plethora of secrets. Indeed, it's interesting to consider that when I was inculcated with Nazi fetishist programming originally by Dr. Leonard Johnson at a variety of black sites around Wiltshire in the early months of 2015, after I'd begun to gauge the fact that something had happened at Grenville Lodge. I was designated TF-84 within the Roundway experiment due to my proximity with devices. Indeed, if I'd been in another part of the country, I'd have probably fallen into a different experiment. However, my proximity to devices made sure that I entered the Roundway experiment and therefore designated as part of a network of experimental test subjects. And indeed, I am a terminal test subject in a terminal experiment. Therefore, this experiment on me will never end. And indeed, the voice to skull technology is all a part of this experiment. And indeed, all of the effects on my brainwaves by the voice to skull technology are recorded and utilized as data by the neuroscientists that are studying me as a test subject. Indeed, also the effects of the radiation are being tested. Indeed, the amount of radiation that I put up with in the past 6 years has effectively caused me to become a mutant. Indeed, the radiation has only enhanced my paranormal phenomena capacity. So it's interesting to consider that, in a sense, the irradiation of me by the devices police cells has basically backfired on them, because I am now possessing extraordinary paranormal capabilities due to my having become a mutant. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, as I stated before, during the years 2012 and the early months of 2013, I was trained as a schizophrenic super spy by the British intelligence services at Grenville Lodge as part of Project Aniseed. And indeed, this training has served me well in terms of my ability for HUMINT, i.e. human intelligence gathering, and PSI-INT, i.e. psychic intelligence gathering. So it's interesting to consider that without the training in intelligence gathering and data harvesting by the British intelligence services, I would not have been able to pull off my initial exposures of Grenville Lodge and my exposures that continue today. So it's all very interesting to consider indeed. However, I don't believe that I owe the British intelligence services, i.e. the MI6 networks, a debt of gratitude at all. Because as a paranoid schizophrenic, I would probably have been able to have this capacity anyway. So interesting to consider this. Indeed, paranoid schizophrenics are a very special breed. And the Freemasons and the higher IQ societies know this, and therefore torment, harass, and persecute paranoid schizophrenics in an attempt to quash any form of resistance to the domain of the astral realms that the Freemasons and the high IQ societies inhabit. Indeed, the high IQ societies are heavily engaged in psychical and paranormal research. Although they express a disdain for those with paranormal capabilities, indeed, they attempt to harness the use of individuals with paranormal capabilities for ongoing conflicts with the Soviet Union and China. And indeed, it's interesting to consider that the Soviet Union, i.e., the Russian intelligence services, are heavily engaged in parapsychological studies. However, they treat their test subjects in a most revolting fashion. And indeed, Russian intelligence are very interested in my paranormal capacity. However, they know that I would not serve them. So it's interesting to consider. Although I previously stated that the Soviet intelligence services are technically the lesser of the two evils when compared to the British and American intelligence services, there are some flaws to this argument. Indeed, I suppose one can consider that the Soviet treatment of parapsychological test subjects is truly abominable. Indeed, they neutralized many of their own test subjects often. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, I would not align myself with any of these cryptocratic elements. So it's all very interesting. Indeed, the Russians were watching me very intently at Grenville Lodge. And that was how they were able to incorporate me into a GRU unit, i.e. GRU unit 11913, when I was in the Balkans. And indeed, I wasn't just in the Balkans, I was also in Moldova, Romania, Chechnya, and Russia also. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, I carried out a few assassinations there utilizing kitchen utensils. So it's interesting to consider that I was basically a lunatic employed by a foreign intelligence agency with a complete knowledge of the British intelligence services. Indeed, I was under mind control, so I wasn't willingly operating for the GRU at all, just as I hadn't been a consenting operative of the British intelligence services when I was operating as a part of Project Annecy, conducting remote viewing, psychic intelligence spying on Russian installations such as the Vladimirovka air base. It's interesting to consider that for a short time in 2013, I was in a psychiatric hospital in Voronezh in southwestern Russia. Indeed, that was a rather strange experience, especially considering Russian lunatics became a very big influence on my way of physical appearance and my mental ideas. So it's interesting to consider all of this. Indeed, it's very strange indeed. And indeed, I've figured out several times over the past 13 years that something had occurred at Grenville Lodge. So I guess the amnesia has begun to wear down at certain times. And when it has, the networks connected to Grenville Lodge, including those of Dr. Leonard Johnson, have reprogrammed me again and went so far as to inculcate me with Nazi fetishist ideology, whereby I became a mind-controlled operative of Nazi factions of British intelligence within the Gladio 4 framework, designated TF-84 in the Roundway experiment. So it's all very interesting to note that everything seems to be coming around full circle, and indeed with amnesia that has been hypno programmed within the brain, and indeed even with semi-lobotomized states such as I underwent at Grenville Lodge in the first couple of months of 2013. Indeed, even with these processes having occurred when a targeted individual, i.e. a test subject in a terminal experiment, slash mind control victim reaches the age of 35, they begin to have flashbacks and begin to remember little details of what went on around the time and before the time of the processes described. So it's interesting to consider indeed. I'm not entirely sure of the exact processes as to how I was semi-lobotomized. However, I was semi-lobotomized by a network of neurosurgeons connected to the Hellfire Club, Grenville Lodge Freemasons. So it's all very interesting to consider indeed. During my last bout in the psychiatric hospital, before I was transferred to the forensic psychiatric facility at Blackberry Hill in Bristol, I was originally incarcerated after being sectioned, in Callington Road Psychiatric Hospital, which is not a forensic unit. However, it's known for mistreatment of patients. And indeed, due to my extremely psychotic behavior, which the staff couldn't handle, I was locked in a padded cell for several weeks on my own in isolation, and was given what is termed a chemical straitjacket, i.e. Acufase, which is a combination of antipsychotic, benzodiazepine, and side effect cessation psychoactive pharmaceutical drugs. And indeed, during this time also, several British intelligence operatives turned up at the facility and were allowed access to me in my isolated state, and basically utilized a brain-sucking device on me, so that for 3 years, between the months of autumn 2021 and autumn 2024, I basically forgot everything that I'd exposed and basically everything that I'd been doing. Indeed, I could remember little tidbits of the fact that I was an underground conspiracy theorist. However, I wasn't fully aware of the details, and indeed, the psychiatric system also taught me to basically hate myself for being active on the conspiracy theory circuit, and basically taught me to believe that everything I stated was merely idiotic delusion. So it's interesting to consider that the psychiatric system in the United Kingdom acts as a branch of the British intelligence services, and indeed many individuals are disposed of in psychiatric establishments when they are considered a threat to national security. Indeed, I have stated before that I believe that I encountered many schizophrenic super spies and former British intelligence operatives during my time incarcerated in the psychiatric system, which in the United Kingdom spans the total time of 6.5 years so far. Indeed, I am half expecting to be dragged to Green Lane Psychiatric Facility in the coming months, and indeed, that would not seem too harebrained or far-fetched an idea. Indeed, these former British intelligence operatives and schizophrenic super spies are disposed of in the psychiatric system to basically cover up for British intelligence operations. So it's interesting to consider this. Indeed, many so-called normal operatives of the British intelligence services who are not schizophrenic super spies or mind controlled are often incarcerated in psychiatric hospitals when they decide to whistleblow on the intelligence or security services. Indeed, any whistleblowing is deemed a matter of national security. Indeed, my ongoing exposures of the Walter Rose and Sons butcher shop and Devizes Police child rape and organ harvesting rings are also viewed by the British intelligence services and the security service constructs as a matter of national security. And indeed, I am basically expecting to be hit with a defense of the realm project. Indeed, so it's interesting to consider all of this. Indeed, as I stated, if I wasn't telling the truth about Devizes Police and the Walter Rose and Sons butcher shop organ harvesting cartel, Why would the devices police cells of operatives feel the need to irradiate me constantly and utilize this voice to skull beaming technology to infest my head with implanted thoughts, memories, and voices? So it's all very interesting to consider indeed. Moonraker Lodge number 8747 are regularly hosting sacrificial ceremonies within their underground compartments where they are sacrificing children and summoning demons from the souls of the tortured children, attempting to infest my brain with these dead souls and demons. So it's interesting to consider the lengths that the Moonraker Lodge number 8747 networks of initiated Freemasons and their devices police brethren of Golden Lodge number 4, situated in the vaults of the Wiltshire Police headquarters, will go to attempt to destabilize and derail my ongoing exposures of the devices network. Indeed, these exposures now of the devices police network have reached the heights of my original Grenville Lodge exposures in 2012 and 13 that were scrubbed from the internet. Indeed, I'd kept it quiet from the other students at the University of Buckingham, as I saw them as bots programmed to protect the Matrix. And indeed, my exposures were mainly on Eastern European forums and file sharing platforms. And all of the evidence of these exposures has been scrubbed from the internet in totality by networks connected to Sir Charles Stansted of Special Branch, who was a high-ranking druid of a high IQ society and is basically overseeing the entire Grenville Lodge mind control programming operation. So it's interesting to consider the interconnectivity there between Grenville Lodge number 1787 and the highest ranks of the British police. Indeed, as stated before, the British police are a Masonic entity, as we are witnessing now with the clamming up of devices police when threatened, and the fact that they are being overseen by various high-ranking druids and the highest networks of the Royal Arch Freemasonry. Indeed, the Master Mason Samuel Buchan of the United Grand Lodge of England is one of the highest ranking druids within the Ancient Order of Druids. So it's all very interesting to note. And it's interesting to consider the networks of people that are really running this strange little island we live on. Indeed, I believe at the moment Devices police are attempting to gain a warrant to enter my premises and arrest me on suspicion of some sort of crime that I haven't actually committed. So it's interesting to consider the lengths that all of these people, i.e. Devices Police and Moonraker Lodge number 8747, are prepared to go to. Indeed, I suppose this is my own fault for being very vocal and very open online about these people, and indeed, what with me exposing these people in the way that I'm doing, there are naturally going to be people who want to fuck me over. Indeed, it seems large percentages of the population of devices also want to fuck me over, and indeed they were attempting to fuck me over while I was living in devices. It was probably because they were scared of some sort of fallout by my being there. So it's interesting to consider what is going on. Indeed, I suppose my main danger at the moment is Walter Rose and Sons Butcher Shop connected people. Indeed, these networks of Walter Rose and Sons Butcher Shop do extend into Warminster through the interconnectivity between Walter Rose and Sons Butcher Shop and Devices and CJ Robbins Butcher Shop here in Warminster, and the latter's links to the Wyvern Lodge number 8620 and its sister lodge, the Longleat Lodge number 1851. I think, I can't remember exactly the number of the Longleat Lodge, but both of those lodges are incorporated as part of the the network in inverted commas, which is the overarching Masonic intelligence agency, which serves the entity, i.e., NTT, which forms the nucleus around the DVD, NW7, and MI6 networks. So it's all very interesting to consider these overarching intelligence groups. And of course, these networks interconnect with such networks as the Black Cube and the Archimedes group, who are Israeli private intelligence and security complexes. This brings us back to Benjamin Coleman's theory that Freemasonry is a branch of Judaism. Indeed, I don't believe this is an entirely correct statement, though due to Zionist impulses among the Freemasons, there is a certain degree of truth to this. However, I do not believe that the Hebrews control the world. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, I believe that Frankists and Sabbateans are positioned as frontmen by Nazi Imperium networks. And indeed, these Nazi Imperium networks are all New Eon people, i.e., their agenda is very similar to that ascribed to the Order of Nine Angles. And indeed, the Order of Nine Angles are forming a core, high-ranking network within various branches of British intelligence at the moment. So it's interesting to consider this. Indeed, the Order of Nine Angles is to British intelligence these days what the Temple of Set is to the United States military intelligence and national security complex. So it's all very, very interesting to consider, and altogether very strange indeed. Devizes police operatives are themselves Order of Nine Angles operatives, and indeed the Labyrinth cult that forms the core of the Devizes police ritualism is an Order of Nine Angles network, which interestingly interlinks directly with the Lighthouse, i.e. the Lighthouse network that wishes to lobotomize me in a certain mechanism and then have me operating for the British Royals. Indeed, it's all very interesting to consider that I have all these networks circling me at the moment like sharks, attempting to contain me in psychiatric facilities and lobotomize me to an extent. Indeed, I have been semi-lobotomized before via networks of Grenville Lodge neurosurgeons on the instruction of Professor John Drew of Grenville Lodge, who for some reason didn't want me to be killed. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, the authorization for the semi-lobotomy process was given by his higher-ranking Mason, i.e. Professor Julian Lovelock, who was at the time the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Buckingham, which is the corporate front for the Grenville Lodge enterprise, which is a cover, all of it is a cover for intelligence operations, activities, and mind control experimentation. Indeed, it's all very interesting to consider that Freemasons really serve a ceremonial purpose for networks of intelligence cells of the wider British intelligence structure, both state and private. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, the network, i.e. the overarching Masonic intelligence branch, is technically a private network run at its top levels by the Sinclair family, and of course interconnecting with the British Royals through the fact that the Duke of Kent is the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England. However, there are many, many security clearances above the Duke of Kent. Indeed, a lot of the intelligence data is collected in data vaults coordinated by the Sinclair and Cecil families. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, the Sinclairs serve the same role in Scotland that the Cecil family serve in England, i.e. as intelligence chiefs of the network, i.e. the network in inverted commas, which is the main Masonic intelligence branch. So it's all very interesting to consider and very strange how all of these networks interlink and who is really running them. Indeed, we can link all of these networks up to the entity, which is miscast as the core Vatican intelligence operation, when it is actually a German network. So it's all very interesting to consider that the entity, i.e., NTT, is a German network and supposedly always has been. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, the main Vatican intelligence branches are these days found within the Dominican Brothers and various networks of Frankists that have basically inhabited the Vatican hierarchy. Indeed, networks such as Pro Deo are technically a branch of Anglo-American intelligence that interestingly were interconnected with the Black Orchestra of Wilhelm Canaris and therefore lead us back to the DVD and the entity. Indeed, the Franciscan Brothers and the Society of Jesuits are wholly operative for NTT networks, i.e. the entity, and therefore are not technically Vatican intelligence. They are German shadow intelligence, i.e. Deutsche Verteidigungsdienst operatives. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, as I stated before, the majority of high-ranking Royal Arch Freemasons see themselves as continuations of Nazi SS officers. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, many of them actually believe they are reincarnated Nazi SS officers, and indeed they may well be reincarnated Nazi SS officers. So it's all very interesting to consider. Indeed, they believe that it's their duty to sacrifice Hebrew commoners and mental patients to their deities, who are a synthesis of Celtic Druidic demon gods, Germanic demon gods, and Zionist demon gods. So it's all very interesting to consider. And indeed, in the overall mind control programming of lower level operatives within British intelligence, many lower level operatives are programmed to believe that they are Hebrew Holocaust victims reincarnated, or Hebrew slaves of Egyptian masters and pharaohs. Indeed, it's all very interesting to consider. This shows that there is a dominant eugenicist strain within the British intelligence services, and indeed, this is a long-reaching truth historically. So it's all very, very, very interesting to consider and really quite strange. Indeed, the Grenville Lodge networks are seeking an opportunity to basically break me because they've had enough of me basically moving from location to location in the country, exposing Masonic networks. Indeed, what began with the Grenville Lodge number 1787 exposure moved on into a Moonraker Lodge number 8747 exposure, and has now moved on to an exposure of Wyvern Lodge number 8620. However, I haven't begun to collate too much data yet on the Warminster Wyvern Lodge number 8620. However, I have shouted at them. So it's all very interesting to note. Indeed, Councillor Jack Jones, the Mayor of Warminster, is an initiate of Longleat Lodge number, I can't remember the number of it. It's like 1851 or 1852 or 1581. I can't remember. But he is an initiate of Longleat Lodge and a high-ranking Freemason who knows initiates of Grenville Lodge. So it's interesting to consider. Indeed, these people are all part of the overarching body of the Masonic Intelligence Agency, i.e. the network in inverted commas, which has basically signed a death warrant on me via a soft kill mechanism to be carried out by Devise's police operatives who are themselves initiates of Golden Lodge Number 4, which is a Masonic police fraternity. It's not technically an ugly network, it's part of a branch of British police fraternities, which are slightly distinct. However, it is located in the catacombs beneath the Devizes Police Headquarters, i.e., a location of child rape, sacrifice, necrophilia, mutilation, and cannibalism. So it's all very interesting to note how all of this interlinks with the ongoing organ harvesting by butcher Freemasons all across the county. Indeed, C.J. Robbins' butcher shop in Warminster are heavily involved in the organ harvesting, organ trafficking, and organ distribution trades. So it's all very interesting to note. Indeed, I'm not entirely sure what to really do about anything anymore. However, I'm going to continue to produce content. Indeed, I'm going to leave it there now. Thank you.